I've been on a few streams today and yesterday. I hope you will. I hope you will go through them. They are conveniently time-stamped, so you can quickly get a gist of what was discussed, the topics, and maybe the conclusions if I summarize the timestamps properly. And what I'm trying to say is that my words haunt me. And one of the well, and the what I've said that haunts me so much is me saying it's easy to point out the problem. And I was talking to Scott earlier, and I was saying that people might even agree with your premise, but they might have a different idea of what they should do. Democracy has failed its users. Democracy, representative democracy, has failed voters. And I think a lot of people will say, oh, we knew that a long time ago. But then the question arises, well, what are you going to do about it? And a lot of people will think, well, what do you expect me to do about it? Nobody listens to anything I say. And the same thing could be said about me, but it's still easy. You say what you think is wrong. So you have to say that um, democracy has failed. And I'm no spring chicken, but I remember people who, well, I'm thinking of a particular person who is now deceased, and he was the one who told this joke about, well, if democracy did if democracy worked, they would ban it. And of course, this is in fact true. And people still vote. And even though he said that to me all those years ago, I still took an interest in politics, and I still got excited about elections and went on about who I think should vote. And now I think time's running out. But what is easy? You'll be asking me, well, what's easy? What is this thing that you say is easy? And I'm saying, oh, obviously it is the running of our mouths. It is easy for us to say that democracy is failed. And then you might be faced with a shrug of the shoulders, the person saying, yeah, I knew that. I knew that ages ago. My grandparents said so. And what are you going to do about it? And I'd say, if you have any kind of engagement, you could say, well, the least we can do is say representative democracy has failed, or it's still legal to do so. We already know the reaction people get when we say these things. So we'll be accused of commies, fascists, Nazis, all the political ideologies that have a that are known for being a one-party state. And I spoke to Scott earlier, and I said, well, these are Americans. They could say it's a Washingtonian idea. We actually have a one-party state because George Washington did make a speech containing a lot of advice, and it is still read out every year by a senator, or every year between a Republican and a Democrat, but it is read without understanding. And until the can get Americans to take an interest in what I'm saying, they tend to shrug their shoulders and say, well, it's not going to go very far. But what do words mean? Of course, you don't expect anything to go that far just because you say it, particularly if it pertains to politics, because, well, we know how many opinions there are. and how just stating your position will get all these people who disagree with you to pop out of the blue and call you names. So I guess before you say anything political, be ready for the opposition and also anticipate the opposition and have a ready answer. And the answer usually is, well, nobody cares. What do you expect us to do about it? And I think it's actually the easiest thing to say, well, don't vote. And then you will get some kind of, if that person on the other end is halfway interested in politics, well, then you be not participating, and then you complain. And this was actually what a flatmate of mine said a long time ago, but I wasn't at the time thinking of not participating. But this is a kind of stock answer that you get to certain positions you might take. And again, you have to have a ready answer. Um, Are you, in fact, not participating by challenging anyone who proposes to carry on voting? No, because you will. Well, the least you can do is be remembered as this deceased friend of mine was when he said, if voting worked, they would ban it. So I remember him, and he's been deceased quite a few years now. At least you get remembered for saying certain things, particularly when they're still relevant. So I don't see what the problem is for anyone under the system of representative democracy to say, well, do you think democracy actually works to solve our problems? And the answer is no. And one of the things Scott said was they seem to be creating problems. Or maybe he didn't say that. Maybe he said they don't care or tend to talk about certain problems as if they care to distract us. I would go so far as to say they create problems. They actually create problems and then stop us from complaining, or if they can't stop us from complaining, they will call us a name. And so we must be certain of our ground. Well, at least I'm certain of my ground. I am known for going around telling people not to vote. And to the extent that I am helpful in putting people in touch with each other because they support a particular party or something, or are interested in a political party, well, I will be helpful when I can. And when they noticed, some of my detractors might say, but I thought you said you don't believe in voting. But this is also helpful if somebody remembered what I said to use it against me. So I'll try um, to lay out the usual um, progress of these discussions. It's well, what do you expect me to do about it? Well, I guess I expect you to argue about it. You could, well, you could say it doesn't work uh, often and clearly enough to be known as somebody who says, what is the point of voting if every time you vote, the government gets worse? So don't vote. If you don't vote, you have no right to complain. Well, only if you don't propose an alternative. And I do propose an alternative. And so the next stage of the exchange will be the people vote for, or the people other people vote for, if you get that voting, don't really care. They're just there to put on the show of caring, but in fact, um, are there to make things worse. And what are you to do if the people in charge are utterly corrupt, even if the laws are perfectly sensible, but they're not fairly enforced? I'm saying, obviously, we need an official moral system. I didn't get a chance to make that point to Scott, but obviously, you need a value system and a behavior system that will get people at least doing the right thing. And of course, the difficulty will be getting people to agree. And I think we should be grateful to the Jews for coming up with, something like the no-hate laws, even if actually quite a lot of people are anti-Semites, and they might just reject the no-hate laws because it comes from the Babylonian Talmud, in which case I guess you can accuse them of being Nazis. Not that people care anymore these days, because everyone at stock has been accused of being a Nazi, including Jews themselves. Jews accuse each other of being Nazis. So I really wouldn't worry about being called names. And I really think the least you should, the least you could be doing is what you should be doing. And I'm not asking anyone to climb Mount Everest, without their own oxygen supply or anything. I'm just saying, just think it out. Even if you're not sure, even if you don't agree with my premise that representation democracy is a source of problems, at least like to talk with other people and and even be prepared to be called and insulted and made a fool of. That's the least you can do. Um, Start a national conversation that cannot be ignored. I suppose they can, ban certain words or ban certain subjects, but until they do that, we can carry on, can't we? And what is the most important thing we need to discuss? We have to identify the problem and propose a solution. And then once we propose a solution, people are going to shout at us and call us names. Fascist, Nazi, misogynist, racist. Um, but if you can't take that, I guess you're not meant for a life in politics or not even meant for, um, well, I'm sorry that you don't know any nice people who agree to disagree in a civil way and um, be able to say what they disagree without calling you names. And I'm sorry, your social circle is so limited. But really, the solution is simple because it's it's a moral problem, right? It's a moral problem. I mean, Americans will say we have this wonderful constitution, our proposition nation, we live in a constitutional republic. But if you talk to them, you'll realize that they have no faith in their politicians. They know that uh, the the their First Amendment rights have been progressively reduced until most Americans fear to be cancelled for saying the wrong thing, and that is why they prefer to avoid discussing anything controversial. And with regard to the TLC, their problem is they're a bunch of respectable, white middle class Americans. And they have shown their faces, and they probably know that they say about themselves as public, and their lives are really well able to view what they do. I mean, for many of these men, it's probably um, one of the things that their wives allow. It's better than their husbands, going to some bar or going to some meeting outside the home. Talk to his internet friends. At least you know where he is, and it's cheap, right? It's cheap, and but it all also means that all these conversations are online, and many of these people have shown their faces, and if there is a sense that middle class people don't discuss certain things because they're doing well enough and they're not angry like the trash. They're, they have a certain degree of affluence to, and if they start complaining like trailer trash, people will think the trailer trash and then their status will be lower, etc., etc. And you get also this division of women and men. And I know women are very emotional, and they will take it as a personal insult and probably think of you as evil if you disagree with them. But men are rather more forgiving. And, and women don't like to have their bubbles burst. And possibly they don't like their husbands fundamentally disagree with them about, well, some belief they hold to be fundamental, such as feminism. But what I think was a great milestone in my discussion with Scott was that he actually expressed um, a kind of masculine ability in that he would want to bring his son would um, instinctively defend a woman if she were being intimidated in a public place. He would want to bring up his son, just take up his phone and record the thing and not intervene. While a proper what do I what am I trying to say? So these instincts of masculinity still still reside in Scott in a way it is mostly absent from most Western men. And that I think is what is so disturbing in that a lot of men think, well, why would I risk my life to defend some strange female if she's not even related to me? I could be stabbed, I could be shot. Why would I do such a thing? But there are two, which I'm not entirely dismissing. There might be women who say, well, they defend me or your mother, but certainly don't defend some, female you've never met, you will never meet again. Get yourself hurt or killed over defending this strange female. But on the other hand, we generally, as women, would like to think that we live in a society where men would come to our aid if we were being attacked, and not be living in a society where men would just take their guns and record our being attacked by some criminal. So in many ways we are conflicted. We will say, well, it depends. Um, Obviously we would want some strange man to come to our assistance um, in a public place, but we would not want our son or our husband or our father to get hurt defending some strange female. And sadly, these conflicts are universal and eternal. And what we can all perhaps agree on is that we, we want to live in a society where standing up for women, being intimidated in a public place is not a life or death um, situation. And we would like these incidents to be reassuringly rare. But in a failed state where everyone is poor and angry and bitter and violent, things like that will happen with increasing frequency. I suppose between now and this dystopian future that I am predicting, and many others also are, if the problem is not corrected, is of course a social, moral, and political problem. Somebody has to put his head above the parapet in order to have a better look, but also become a target. And this requires focus and organisation and main solidarity. And when we talk about solidarity, we mean a group of people who agree about certain beliefs, values, and rules. And we go back to religion again. And we need to understand what is wrong with the current political orthodoxy, even if it hasn't got a proper name. We do have a political orthodoxy, and it is called liberalism. And it would be helpful if we talk about the principles of liberalism and what's wrong with it. And this is this is really all I hope for, but I never get the chance. It's always, oh, I have to go now. It's usually some, trivial excuse. But these discussions need to come to a conclusion. If the current political orthodoxy is not serving American voters or Western voters or any voter that is living under representative democracy, then obviously something needs to be done. And what can be done is easy because we just voice up to people around us at the appropriate time, of course. I'm sure many people will be talking about, they will be complaining about their government, won't they? So this is all I propose. We speak our minds. I'm not expecting anyone to agree with me, but the premise surely is whether you are far right, far left, centrist, is that something that's terribly, terribly wrong. And I imagine the instinct would be to blame the people you never liked, you to think in a more abstract way and stop blaming the people that you've always disliked because the problem is systemic. That's why I talk about these abstract ideas about systems. So the problem is that you have, in theory, in paper, on paper, in theory, the most perfect set of rules, but nobody really follows them. So what are you going to do with corrupt and incompetent politicians who control the establishment, be the police, the army, the executive, and the corrupt And I'm saying it's easy. You question their morality and wonder why the current morality is not imposing decent standards of honesty and reason. And then we will be talking about religion, won't we? From politics to religion in one little step. Because politics is about the interpretation of the rules, and religion is about the rule system itself. So we already know that Americans haven't got a Christian moral system. Maybe that's their problem. Isn't it their problem? I think they're Christian, but do they really believe in any of it? And what about separation of church and state? Why did the founding fathers do it? Why do Americans feel no interest at all in asking themselves, were the founding fathers Christian? And if not, was it a good or bad thing not to be Christian? But if they were Christian, then, well, would there be a First Amendment? So we don't know. We don't know. Well, I think I know. It is better to give people a safe space to discuss ideas without necessarily thinking that they are absolutely correct. They're just kind of working out the problem. It's like a rough draft. You don't have to commit to your rough draft or your essay or, you know, column of figures that you're trying to add up or multiply. You're kind of working out the problem by drawing diagrams, but you don't necessarily have to commit to space to work things out. And this is all I'm proposing. But if people are too afraid to participate, then, well, obviously something is wrong. They lack courage. They lack the intellect. They're afraid of their wives. Something like that. Can men be afraid of women? I think we are afraid of the things that we love. We fear losing them, particularly under the rules of there are many unacknowledged fears. Islamophobia is an unacknowledged fear, and I have seen, well, very vivid demonstrations of Islamophobia. But you can still deal with it by making the point that there is only one God and that the First Amendment is supported by Chapter 2, verse 256 of the Quran. Most of the time it's received with um, silence, maybe silent incomprehension. I can only guess at the minds that complain about a problem yet refuse to look at it properly. But maybe I have a problem in that. But there are lots of things that maybe we prefer not to think about. And maybe we think, well, there's some kind of worms. I probably won't do any good by opening this can of worms. But if everybody thought that discussing politics is a can of worms because we're afraid of being called names and getting kicked out of our online community, and there's something wrong with us, isn't there? And actually, even the fear of being kicked out of online communities is not not um, not necessary since opposites attract. You have a view, somebody disagrees with you, you're going back to each other to hash to have it out with them, particularly online. So it's not a problem. I don't think you will ever be in a situation where you will never speak to them again. Even if you don't particularly want to speak to them again, you will run into them, and it is kind of like um, it's like family reunions. And so even these fears are completely unfounded. Of course, there will be women who will be so sensitive that they just want to be left with you know, their easy serenity, and you can't talk about anything in case what you propose is uh, sounds harsh or hurtful or callous, or it's like okay, so don't discuss politics. Men should be discussing politics, or do they really think they have the right to behave like women? Because if they do, they will find themselves increasingly rejected by women. No woman wants to, or no woman can respect a man who is poorer, shorter than her, and stupider than her. And talking about gender relations, it is feminism that is a sacred cow. And I suppose I am relying on very feminized American men who, um, who are probably very fond of their wives to kind of say a few things about feminism. And I don't think they want to. I don't think they do. So I say it on their behalf, but obviously they don't say it. And so we ask ourselves, well, who cares? And I think the men who would most care is the men who have sons, who um, whose parenting they are invested in. If you're atheist, if you're childless, then you really wouldn't be much concerned about the parenting and the education of the next generation. And so it is married fathers who should be privileged over non-parents and unmarried fathers. And of course, this is again controversial. It can only be supported by religion. Yesterday, I was talking to, no, I didn't actually talk to him. I was posting in his live chat the mirror, and he's atheist, but from a Jehovah's Witness background. And there's a marked difference in how married fathers think and talk, and how well, obviously there's a marked difference between marriageable and the atheist and the. I was thinking, what makes people feel spiritual pain or enjoy spiritual comfort? If you don't care about right or wrong, I guess you would only care about sex and shopping. But if you have some idea of right and wrong, you have some idea of truth and falsehood, logic and irrationality, it would actually bother you to be constantly lied to and to be given absurd things to believe in. And this would cause, well, spiritual unease, and you would need to resolve it through, well, complaining about it, I suppose, writing about it, talking about it, and perhaps eventually it will be um, resolved if enough people hear about your problem, agree with you or disagree with you. If they agree with you, they might cooperate with you in doing something to solve the problem, or they will tell you you're being silly. And you might agree that you're being silly and you shut up about it. But I think people have principles or who have an idea of wanting the truth to be, of wanting truth and logic to be operational in their society will feel great spiritual discomfort when they are force fed lies and nonsense. And we move now to the idea of whether believing in the Abrahamic God is logical, because I was talking about the mirror point, and he is surrounded by his atheist associates who reject the Abrahamic God because they think it's absurd to believe a deity, a being whose existence cannot be proven. You could equally say that the non-existence of God cannot be confirmed either. And so if it's 50-50, um, it's only our inclination that makes us want to believe or not believe. And I suppose, well, it would be logical to suppose that somebody already married who is happy in this marriage would want, who is a married parent, would want uh, be in a society supports married parents, and those who are not parents to be indifferent to child rearing. And you would expect the government to have a view on whether to support marriage or not. And we already know that Western governments do not support marriage. And this is something we should question. In China, they have a three-child policy. No such thing exists in the West. They don't even talk about any child policy. And this, I think, is conclusive evidence of the indifference of Western governments to sexual reproduction, rearing of the next generation in homes with run by married parents in a loving relationship. We only have, Well, I was talking to Vincent, yes, and he's the antithesis of me. What I say, sexual reproduction has to be within wedlock or in treated as a sexual offence. Um, he will say the opposite and even deny that marriage is eugenic. But I don't think he can because the whole idea of marriage is that you have to jump through a hoop in order to be married. Somebody has to want to marry you, and it's not enough that there are people who want to marry you. You yourself have to want to marry, because if you don't want to marry, you are unmarriageable. And then, um, and then we have to ask about what qualities we would comprise being marriageable, which is, well, you would have thought being heterosexual. In the case of men, having a steady job. In the case of a woman, well, I guess a sweet and caring nature and, um, yes, a loving and loyal nature. Yes, but I imagine most children would prefer their mother to be um, affectionate and conscious of their needs without um, to articulate it particularly well. But anyway, if the government cared about birth rate, then they obviously would have some kind of policy. And we already know that Western governments are matriarchies and they are happy with gay marriage and or even people not marrying because of the other component of the new religion of environmentalism. So if you've spoken to anybody in the Green Party, you would know that it's mostly cat ladies and men who have sex with cat ladies. So, yes, so there is, this, what's his name? Zach Balansky, Green Party UK. So I'm saying that there's a definite leaning towards anti-natalism in um, in the West, and it is sinister. You don't have. I'm not saying we should be having um, loads of children. Well, we don't. What am I trying to say? I'm saying if if everybody's complaining about uncontrolled mass immigration, it must be something to do with the low birth rate, and therefore it has to be raised if you want to deal with the problem of uncontrolled migration. But then I do call people who say, "Oh, well, there's no labour shortage. It's not a problem. It's something else." And the person telling me that I have in mind is somebody who doesn't intend to become a married father, and this, I think, is really the problem. It is about standards of sexual morality and the birth rate, and the idea that demographics is destiny, which is obviously true. So Zach Polanski is gay, isn't he? And I think these things matter. So he's Jewish and he's gay. And this is, and also we have to remember that the first Green MP was elected in Brighton, which is the gay capital of the UK. So obviously sexual morality as something was definitely linked. To whether being gay is considered respectable, encouraged, and obviously the more you raise the status of people who don't have children or who are gay, you will have a demographic problem which can only be solved by the importing of cheaper, more willing foreign labour. It seems an easy enough system to understand, but I see a lot of people denying it. Probably because they don't want to admit their mistakes. And so, as well as there being moral, political, social, and economic problems, there is the psychological problem of denial through indulging in the deadly sin of pride. But really, I just want to say that it is easy in theory to admit our mistakes and to talk about what we think is the problem and what could be the solution, and if we think everyone around us is corrupt, including the voters, because it has been said that people deserve the government they get, then the answer must be to repent. It's so easy to say. I'm just sitting here running my mouth, pointing out the obvious, that I hope will not be denied too often and by too many people suffering from character problems, having mental health issues, being unable to accept the truth, and wanting to soldier on towards the folly of following their lives. I hope I have made myself reasonably clear in under 50 minutes. Thank you for your attention.